You're listening to Just Hit Play with your hosts, Peter and Nick Cabral. If you're tired of your stagnant, streamed music feed, then strap yourselves in for an intergenerational sonic journey through Peter and Nick's favourite songs.
Welcome to episode 45 of Just Hit Play. I'm your host, Peter. With me, as always, is Nick. Nick, how you doing?
I'm doing all right. Just got a week and a half left of my classes, and then exam season starts, so trying to finish strong, get across the finish line, and get my undergraduate degree.
Nice. Now, Last week you mentioned that spring was there. Has that come true?
Nope, it's been snowing.
I think so. Yeah, I thought it got cold again for you.
Yeah, freezing rain yesterday actually. Oh. So that's fun. That's always nice when you have to scrape your car off in the morning before driving it anywhere. Yeah. In the end of March, you wouldn't think that would have to happen.
Yeah, what's going on with you guys? Why is it still cold? It's April.
Yeah, climate change. It's a bitch.
Yeah. It's funny. The summers are hotter, but the winters are colder.
Yeah. So it goes.
Yeah. We were talking off air. I'm flying out tomorrow morning, so I have to be up at 4, and I got to be on a flight at 6 a.m. to Mackay. So. Thank you very much for recording today because I'll be gone all weekend, so we'd have no other time to record. So I appreciate that.
Yeah, of course.
And we're moving into 80s music week, or month, I should say. We're probably going to do 2 months of 80s music. So I'm really curious to see what you thought of The Clash. But before we get into that, let's say hi to Darren, our engineer in Brisbane. Darren, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
All right. Thanks, Darren. Okay, so first up is The Clash, London Calling. Darren, just hit play.
London calling to the faraway towns. Now war is declared and battle come down. London calling to the army.
Okay, Nick, tell me what you thought of The Clash. We've talked about it for a while, but this was your first opportunity to hear them.
Yeah, so I realized that everything about this song seems so familiar. I recognized the way the song starts, and the chorus even sounded familiar a little bit. But it's a really, really fantastic song. I've had it playing on repeat this whole past week. It's so good, and actually purposefully listening to it instead of wherever I may have heard it in the background. It's clear that it is a really great song. It's so enjoyable.
It's funny to kick off this 80s month or 2 months. The Clash obviously got their start in the 70s. They were influenced by the Ramones, and they started putting out music about 77. So this was their third album. This album came out in January of 1980. So I thought for the 80s music that I'm going to get you to listen to, we're going to start off really, really early in the 80s. This album was very interesting. It was a double album, which was very un-punk rock-like. As you know, the Ramones was 1.5 minute, 2 minute songs. There was no big opus. So strangely, because they released a double album, which was un-punk rock-like, it then became punk rock-like because being punk rock is going against the what you're supposed to do, sort of thing.
Yeah. So I see what they're going for. Yeah.
So strangely, it was punk rock-ish to release a double album, even though that's not really punk rock.
You know what I found to be also un-punk rock-like of this song was, I think that they're actually really, really good at playing all their instruments, and they're really good singers.
Yeah. They're very good musicians. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. They're really good musicians, and even to the degree where I thought, I know the 80s, they had a lot of modern production techniques and stuff, but I still thought this song was ahead of its time in a lot of aspects.
Yeah, they were a little bit at a crossroads when this album came out, because when the Clash started, they were very poor. They were a street band. They didn't have any money. And then all of a sudden they signed this record deal and they made a ton of cash. And there was a huge backlash in the punk rock community about the Clash starting this scene because of all the money that they now had. So there was little bit of writer's block, and then they eventually, when they came to terms with their success, they released this album. And this whole album is really about, coming of age, getting into your adulthood. There's a little bit of a class struggle. London Calling is basically calling out London for its hypocrisy and things like that. Now, London's a fun town. I've been to London. I love London, but it's the English society is a very class-driven society.
Yeah, no doubt.
Which is very punk rock. Yeah,
I've also been to London. Great city, phenomenal sights, very nice people. But like you said, just British society as a whole is very, very class driven.
Sure. Yeah.
And I really like the line in this song about the phony Beatlemania, which I'm guessing is alluding to the sound the Beatles popularized that sort of took over the UK music scene, and they had a lot of copycats almost, and that was really the popular sound. Is that accurate, or was it something else, or was it even a direct shot at the Beatles?
As we talked about last week, where they fired their bass player because he talked about Paul McCartney too much, there was a feeling that the Beatles had their day, and it was time to move on from the Beatles.
Okay.
So yeah, that was definitely you can't really be in a punk rock band if you like the Beatles. Not like its aesthetics or its ethics was very definitely anti-Beatle.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. So the first question on the application for a punk rock band was, do you like the Beatles? Yes or no?
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So you couldn't really try to mimic the Beatles or record Beatle-esque sort of sound. The Clash kind of invented ska for this album.
Really?
Ska has its roots in reggae. It's sort of like a European or white reggae, which is a ska. It's like a rockabilly, a little bit faster music than reggae.
Right.
And the only reason they sort of invented the ska thing is because they needed to catch their breath a little bit during live shows. So they introduced a little bit more of ska music just to slow down the pace a little bit, just so they could, not blow themselves out, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Is there a ska song on London Calling? Did it start with London Calling, the album?
Yeah, it's Lost in the Supermarket is pretty ska. There's my favorite song. It's not really ska, but my favorite song on this album is called Clampdown. Clampdown has this really great military beat to it. And when I used to run a lot, I used to listen to this would be the first song I listened to when I would start running, because it just has that perfect 4/4 time. I would just, my pace for my running would be this song. And it wasn't very fast and it wasn't too slow. It was a great running track. So I've listened to Clapdown a lot.
I thought even this song had really, really good rhythm, which was carried by the drums, in my opinion.
Yeah.
The drums have this steady rhythm, and it's one of the ones where your head's bobbing the same rhythm the entire time, and you really get into it that way.
Yeah.
So I really appreciated that.
Up until probably Green Day, this might have been the most successful punk rock album ever released. Now, Green Day obviously have sold truckloads of records, and American Idiot, and whether you like Green Day or not, or whether you think Green Day is punk, I'll just label Green Day as sort of punk light, I guess.
Sure.
But this would have been, this sold a lot of records. It's considered one of the greatest albums of all time. It's considered maybe the greatest album from the 80s. I think Rolling Stone definitely puts it up, if not number one. It's definitely in the top 5 for greatest albums released in the 80s.
Yeah, and I think that's sort of where I became aware of it, and why I was so excited to listen to it, is just because of this reputation it's taken on and its legacy, where it's getting put on all these lists and people talk so highly of this album. Now, did this album sort of signify the end of punk rock's prime? Sure.
Yeah, they, if I'm not mistaken, I know the Clash released at least one more album after this. They broke up shortly in the early 80s. Joe Strummer and, I can't remember the other band member's name. They sort of had a bit of a falling out. Joe Strummer died a few years ago. Like I said, in your 20s when you do a lot of drugs, it's okay. But once you reach your 50s and 40s, you should probably stop doing drugs.
Probably, yeah.
And speaking of that, I guess this week the news came out that Taylor Hawkins has died from the Foo Fighters, who had a lot of substances in his blood. It was sort of discovered, and that's quite sad. So yeah, maybe stop doing drugs when you hit your 30s. I don't know. I don't want to tell people how to live, but medically that might be good advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you know, actually, speaking of Taylor Hawkins, we were talking about last week how AC/DC replaced their singer within like 4 weeks of Bon Scott dying. It would be like if Dave Grohl had died of the Foo Fighters and they replaced him 4 weeks after his death and recorded an album 7 weeks after his death. And that album, how would that album be received? And that's
impossible.
That's sort of what AC/DC did. Yeah.
No, that's impossible. That could never happen.
Yeah. No, it's such a different world.
The Foo Fighters would have to just end.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be like, it wouldn't continue. There's no way.
No, you're right. It's such a different world. So yeah, that's what when I heard Taylor Hawkins had died, it just got me thinking about AC/DC again. And,
yeah, not to go off on a separate tangent here, but I've never really got into the Foo Fighters at all. Never really checked out their stuff.
Okay, so I've seen the Foo Fighters live. Good band. I'm not necessarily a fan of the Foo Fighters. I like one or two songs. The other band that I really liked in the 90s that I cannot stand right now is the Red Hot Chili Peppers.
You think they've outlived their welcome?
I think their sound is so dated, and yeah, I can't listen to a Chili Pepper song at all.
I like a few.
I loved the Chili Peppers in the early 90s when the grunge era sort of was in its heyday. I loved the Chili Peppers, but I can't listen to them now. I'll skip the track.
Damn.
Yeah.
I really like "Can't Stop" by them. I think that's a great song. "Can't Stop." That's really, really good.
No, they have some songs that I absolutely loved, but for whatever reason, I can't do it. Yeah. Which is sad because they were at one time one of my favorite bands.
Damn.
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
Yeah. The other band I can't stand is Queen. I hate Queen.
Yeah, I think we've talked at length
about this.
Queen hate.
They suck so bad.
All right. Well, I feel like we talked about that far enough ago, where the Queen fans might have started to come back to the podcast.
I have one other Queen thing. Someone wrote on Facebook, type something that everyone that is universally loved that you hate, and I put in Queen, the person and the band. So yeah, that was my last Queen thought for the day.
Well, the Queen of England is not doing so well health-wise, reportedly. So
maybe this will be apropos. I guess maybe when this episode comes out, could be some news coming down the pipe.
Yeah. Well, anyway, London Calling, Clash, great song. I'm absolutely going to listen to this album all the way through the next chance I get.
Yeah.
Because this was such a strong start to the Clash, and I've heard "Rock the Casbah" by them. That's the only other song, though. So I'm really excited to get more into them.
My favorite songs in this album is "Lost in the Supermarket" is really good. "Clamp Down," and there's a hidden track, which might be the best song on the album, called "Train in Vain." Another great, not on this album, another great Clash song is "Should I Stay or Should I Go?"
Oh, I know that song too.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's one of my other favorite Clash songs. So yeah, so they definitely have some classic tunes.
Yeah, and I said this earlier, but it really was hard for me to believe, and still is, that this was made like in the 80s, because so much of it sounds like modern music. Specifically like the way the vocals are reverbed and echoed. That was super just crazy to me.
Yeah.
And there's some really cool like panning going on with guitars at certain points where it's like two entirely different guitars in each in 1 year.
Yeah, which is very reggae like. Reggae, sometimes the guitar and the drums are playing at two different syncopations or two different beats. Yeah, and I think that when they introduce a little bit more is ska and reggae into their sound, that definitely comes through.
Yeah, definitely. And it just felt that this song feels like experimental, but still accessible and enough to be like replayable and mainstream. Like
Yeah.
the way that they had this really piercing guitar note just sort of rattle through the song at certain
Yeah.
times. Uh, yeah, it's just really creative music, but at the same time, stuff that you can throw on at any time. So I
Now,
really appreciate that.
I don't know if you saw the artwork for this album, the cover of the album. That's
I
one of the
did, yeah.
that's one of the greatest rock photography sort of. And as a photographer, I just want to touch on it for a second. That's considered like one of the classic album covers of all time. That's the bass player smashing his bass, and apparently he was smashing the bass because they were playing a show and the security guard wouldn't let fans stand on the seats. And in frustration, he destroyed his I think it was a Les Paul bass. And the photographer didn't want them to use that picture because she thought it was out of focus.
Oh,
But the band loved that picture. They thought it was really sort of what their sound was, and so they overrode her decision and used it. And it's gone down as one of the great rock photography or albums of all time.
yeah, it's a great picture, and I'm really glad they overrode her
Yeah,
her request to not use it.
yeah. Critically, this is probably the most um, critically hyped or well received punk rock albums of all time. It's like I said, it's on all the top 10 lists. Rolling Stone always put this in the top 20 of the greatest albums released of all time, not just the 80s, but of all time. So it definitely went a long way to cement the reputation of the Clash.
Do you think that the one of the reasons or contributing factors this album was so well received is that enough time had gone by, enough punk music had been released where it was sort of palatable to people, to
Yeah,
critics?
it had matured, sure.
Yeah,
Where the Sex Pistols and the Jam, or like I'm just referencing some punk bands from the 70s. Once people had come to terms with what punk rock was and knew that the fabric of Western society wasn't failing, it was just continuing as it always does. And then rock critics started liking that type of music. I think
right.
that went a long way to its selling. I think it sold 5 million records worldwide. And they played some big ass shows in America, especially. I think they played Shea Stadium where the Beatles played um, in America. So they definitely played some big ass audiences from the strengths of this album.
Damn.
Yeah.
Well, good for the Clash. From what I've heard so far, they definitely deserve that success.
Well, they never reformed. So the Sex Pistols reformed a couple of times, and when they asked Johnny Rotten why they were reforming, his answer was, "They're giving us a lot of money." That's the only reason they were reforming. So Lollapalooza, you've heard of Lollapalooza, I'm guessing.
Of course.
So in the 90s, Lollapalooza organizers were trying to get the Clash to headline the tour, basically, and apparently it got very close, but it didn't cross the line. And then Joe Strummer died in the early 2000s, so that obviously can never happen again, being he was probably the main songwriter. So
Okay.
yeah, they never reformed after they broke up. They released some solo albums. Joe Strummer released some solo albums, and it's really pissing me off that I can't remember the name of the other member of the band, but he was in a band called Big Audio Dynamite and Big Audio Dynamite 2. There's two versions of the band, and they were one of the first mainstream bands to use a lot of sampling in their music and a lot of hip hop in their music too. So
Oh,
if you
that's
ever
really
want to
cool.
check out some early English rock and roll hybrid of hip hop, check out Big Audio Dynamite or Bad
Okay.
as they're called. Big Audio Dynamite or Bad Two. So
That too.
it
I've
works. It works either way. Yeah.
I've never seen a band number themselves. That's the
Yeah.
second version. That's
Yeah,
crazy.
yeah. Big Audio Dynamite 2, not came out a little bit later on after Big Audio Dynamite.
Okay.
Yeah. So yes, interesting band, Big Audio Dynamite. Yeah. No, I'm glad you liked it. I thought you would. I think it's London Calling is one of those just classic songs that just continues over generations.
It feels classic.
Yeah.
Like the whole way through it, it just feels like a classic song for sure.
Now, speaking of classics, we're going to listen to Tribe Called Quest. But before we get there, Darren, what did you think of London Calling by The Clash?
Yeah, it's been in my playlist for the last 10 years.
Cool. Thanks, Darren. All right. Talk to us about Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah, so I'm really excited. I feel like you're really excited to talk about this too. Yeah. And this week I had you listen to The Space Program by Tribe Called Quest. It was the first song of their final album, which was the first in 18 years. And unlike The Clash, who did not get back together when they broke up, Tribe Called Quest eventually did to make this album, which dropped in 2016. It's called We Got It From Here. Thank you for your service. And as I said, this is the intro track called The Space Program. So, Darren, why don't you just hit play?
I want to deal with a bigger insult, man. The heat, the heat, the heat, the heat, the heat. It's coming down hard. We got to get our shit together.
It's time to go left and not right. Gotta get it together forever. Gotta get it together for brothers. Gotta get it together for sisters. For mothers and fathers and dead niggas. For non-conformists, one-hitter quitters. For Tyson types and shade figures. Let's get it together, come on, let's make it. Gotta make it, to make it, to make it, to make it, to make something happen, to make something happen.
So, while this might have been their first new music in 18 years, it's definitely a Tribe Called Quest. And I think that's one of the things that struck me right away when I heard this song is, they still got it. These are still the same guys, and they're still making great music. But what did you think of this song as someone who's been a fan for such a long time?
Yeah, I think the rhyming was incredible. I think it was one of those songs that politically it had a lot to say, but it was still just an amazing song. It could just live on the merits of what kind of song it was. And I love the samples. They had some really, really cool samples on the song. And it had this really nice jazz sort of undertone where it really had a nice jazz beat to it, which I found surprising. So I love Tribe Called Quest. I had a chance to see them. Okay, let me rephrase that. I was going to see them. They were playing Lollapalooza one year, and I was very excited. But there were some border issues, and they were not allowed to cross the border. I wonder what it could have been.
Yeah.
But they were denied entry into Canada, so I did not see Tribe Called Quest. So we were quite disappointed when they didn't play. So yeah. So I wish I could have seen. I think it was 93 or 94 when I would have had the chance to see Tribe Called Quest. That didn't happen.
That is such a shame.
Yeah.
But yeah, like you said perfectly, this song is the sampling's incredible, and it's built around this really cool jazzy feel, and it just creates a great vibe. A Tribe Called Quest is great at setting a mood, a chill mood, with these like immaculately chosen samples, and that's something they've literally always done. And their music is they always have a little bit of jazz influence. It's really, really nice, and then they just use it to go really crazy on the rapping. And this song is pretty specifically politically charged, but they've always been socially conscious rappers. If you look back.
Yeah. Now,
so it just felt like a natural evolution of their sound to this whole song.
Now, stop me if I'm wrong. Didn't Tribe Called Quest reunite for a Gorillaz album or a song on the Gorillaz?
I'm not sure about that.
Yeah, I thought it was Tribe Called Quest. I might be wrong. I thought they played on a Gorillaz song.
They may have, because the Gorillaz have been getting some wild features recently.
Yeah.
But
I'm gonna do it. You keep talking. I'm gonna do a quick Google search.
Yeah,
I thought they played on a Gorillaz song.
So it's impossible to talk about the Tribe Called Quest final album and this song without talking about Phife Dawg. And
yeah, tell me about him.
So Phife Dawg, one of the core members of Tribe Called Quest, he's vital to the group. He is the heart and soul of the Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
And his contribution to the song is what makes it really special. He just does the chorus that lasts for pretty much the second half of the song. And it's fairly repetitive, his chorus in the song, but the way the beat wraps around it, the way the samples are built around the chorus and go in and out, it changes dynamically the whole thing. It's really just such a key aspect of the song, in the same way that he was a key member of the group.
Right.
So in 2015, the group reunited. They broke up 17 years prior, but they reunited to perform on Jimmy Fallon, and they said they were going to release one last album together.
Right.
They'd already started working on it in secret, and they said they just got back together and felt really good creative energy, and they wanted to make one last album.
Okay.
But Phife Dawg passed away from complications with diabetes in 2016, just not too long after they said they were going to get back together, make a new album. And when he passed away, the album was pretty much incomplete at the time. But the group rallied together and sort of finished it around his verses and the contributions he had recorded.
I didn't know that.
Before dying.
Yeah.
And so he never heard the finished product. Even most of the songs he's on, he never even heard the finished versions of, because
that's sad. Yeah.
he had just recorded verses, and the beats were works in progress. The other people hadn't done verses on it yet. There weren't any features. But his soul is all over this album still. Just like he plays such a big part in this song, this album is an ode to A Tribe Called Quest, but also to Phife Dawg himself. And
sure.
When you listen to it with that in mind, and when you have that in mind, it really just hits even harder.
Yeah. No, I didn't know he had passed. That's really sad.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, such a good band, and what a great song. I love how it's called the space program as another way of detailing how far away the American African community is from entering the space program. You know what I mean? Like it was like we can't get into that. Like it's sort of, I like how it detailed how that's just not for them. You know that. Yeah. That was such a great line.
Yeah, there's a lot of barriers still that doesn't look like will ever be overcome, right? And this whole album was made sort of in the background of the 2016 presidential election, which is very contentious. So
sure,
it's a lot of politically charged messaging on this. The first single they released, "We the People," very politically charged song. Yep. But as I said before, they've always been socially conscious rappers. It's just with the added benefit of 18 years for such smart guys to mature even more and gain even more wisdom.
Right.
That's really reflected in this album and in this song.
Yeah.
Where they've always had the rapping ability and the writing talent, but now it just feels like they're approaching subject matter from an even more mature perspective, which is really cool as well.
I quickly looked up the Gorillaz, and I was thinking of De La Soul, so it wasn't Tribe Called Quest.
Okay.
It was De La Soul that I got confused with.
One of their contemporaries, so
yes, that's why I thought it was Tribe Called Quest. Now, obviously, Tribe Called Quest is a band from my era. So, how does their music to you stand? Does it stand the test of time for you? Is that a band that you can go back and listen to?
For me, absolutely. I think their music has aged really well because they have influenced so much of hip hop now that their sound, their DNA is all over a lot of the hip hop I listen to.
Yeah.
But aside from me, if we're just talking generally, they do not get near enough recognition from people my age, from rap fans my age. I think they've actually become pretty overlooked in a sad way. It's just with age and looking back, you could say their production seems simple. They don't have the catchy hooks. They're not going for mainstream appeal where it's a lot of replayability and stuff in terms of catchiness and accessibility. So I think that's sort
Yeah.
of hurt their perception nowadays, just by people my age, which is a shame because I really think Tribe Called Quest is one of the most legendary hip hop acts there is.
Well, I think you nailed it on the head why we do this podcast, because there's so much music that needs to be explored that doesn't get the attention it deserves. Or, like I said, back in my day, we were forced to listen to the radio, and
Right.
we were at the whim of the program director or the DJ to what songs we listened to. We had no control over what got played. So we just naturally just got exposed to so much different music. Now with the world at your fingertips, you can only listen to the music that you want. So sometimes people just don't get exposed to other types of music, which is why we're doing this podcast.
Yeah. Nowadays we're at the mercy of the Spotify algorithm, which just goes based off what you already like.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Yeah,
So it's good to explore other genres and other types of music.
yeah, and in my view, while A Tribe Called Quest might not have aged too well to a wider audience, as I said, they push the boundaries of hip hop music, period. Like, they made so many artists' careers possible. Like, Dr. Dre made The Chronic after being inspired by A Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah.
They launched the solo career of Busta Rhymes.
Yeah.
I saw Pharrell Williams say that the Low End Theory, the album by A Tribe Called Quest, was the turning point where he first realized music could be art.
Mhm.
And then I saw another quote from Kierna Mayo, who's the former editor-in-chief of Ebony Magazine, which is a publication centered around Black culture. And she was quoted as saying that Low End Theory and Midnight Marauders gave birth to Neo Everything, that entire class of D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Maxwell, and Lauryn Hill, moving on to Andre 3000, Kanye West, and Talib Kweli. Everything that is left of everything begins with Tribe Called Quest.
Yeah. No, I
think
agree. Yeah.
That's a great way to sum up their impact. We wouldn't have those artists without them. We just wouldn't.
It'd be a very different music scene, that's for sure. I think it's important that, it's such an important band to go back and listen to some of their earlier stuff as well.
Yeah, that whole idea of jazzy sampling, which became ubiquitous in the early mid 2000s, it really, really did.
Now, do you know where they're from? I see. To me, they're a southern act. Like they're from like the South, but that might not even be true.
They're New York. They're New York to the core.
Maybe it's the jazz sort of side of things where I'm thinking of like New Orleans or more of a southern vibe. But okay,
yeah. I think they're Brooklyn, but I could be wrong. Definitely New York City. Yeah.
Cool. No, I was so nice to hear Tribe Called Quest again. Yeah, that was really, really cool.
You should consider just giving this whole album a listen.
Yeah.
I think you'd really like just hearing a band that you used to love and are such a big fan of.
Yeah.
With 18 years of time,
they would have a lot to say. Yeah.
It was a really cool thing to just listen to them revisit that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really recommend it.
No, I loved it. Thank you so much for bringing this to me. Yeah,
of course.
Cool.
Yeah.
Let's ask Darren what he thought.
Yes.
Darren, what did you think?
Too busy a song for me.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Darren.
Thanks, Darren.
Do you have a song for me for next week?
I do. Yeah. So inspired by all the sampling and the huge effect sampling has had on hip hop music from A Tribe Called Quest and everything, I'm gonna get you to listen to "Hazard Duty Pay" by JPEG Mafia.
Okay. Cool.
This is it's a sample heavy song, and we're still rocking with a little bit of a punk rock theme.
Cool.
And just like Slow Tie before him, JPEG Mafia, it's a nice punk rock rapper.
Nice. Is he English as well, or is he American? Do you know?
No, American.
American. Cool.
Yeah. Hazard Duty Pay.
Cool. I'm gonna stretch you a little bit. I'm gonna see if you like this song. This is also so for the next 2 months. I'm gonna get you to listen to nothing but 80s music. This is from 1987 by an artist called Robbie Robertson, and it's called "Somewhere Down the Crazy River."
Okay.
Now, Robbie Robertson is from Canada originally, and he's native Canadian, or at least part native Canadian, and he was in a band in the 60s called The Band. That was the name of the band. It's quite not
Quite original.
They were probably high when they came up with the band.
Thought it was genius.
Yeah, and he released one of my favorite 80s albums at this time, and one of my favorite songs from this album is Somewhere Down the Crazy River. So I want to hear what you think of it, whether you like it or not, because it's a little odd.
Okay.
So let's see if you like it.
All right. I'm excited.
All right, so let's get into some history.
This week in music history.
Okay, in the year 1973, Killing Me Softly by Roberta Flack is still... It had this thing where it was number one, then it dropped out of it went to number two, then it went back to number one. So we're back at number one. So instead of listening to that song, which we've heard before, we're going to listen to the number 8 song, which was by the Canadian Queen Anne Murray, called Danny's Song, which is a very country-laden... It was written by Kenny Loggins. I don't know if you know who Kenny Loggins is.
Of course.
Yes.
Danger Zone.
Danger Zone. So it was written by Kenny Loggins. So Darren, just hit play on Danny's Song.
And even though we ain't got money, I'm so in love with you, honey, everything.
Very country-inspired song. Anne Murray. Do you know anything about Anne Murray?
I can't say I do.
Anne Murray is probably one of the most successful Canadian artists of all time. She was huge in the country music scene in both America and Canada in the 70s and into the 80s. So she's
Shout out to Anne Murray.
Yeah, she's royalty. And in the year 2000, Bye 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 by NSYNC won't go bye bye bye. It's still there. So we're going to stick to the country music theme, and we're going to hear Faith Hill with her song Breathe.
All my thoughts just seem to settle on the breeze when I'm lying wrapped up in your arms.
Not very good. I'm not a country music fan. Let's give it to Anne Murray because she's Canadian.
Yeah, I love a Canadian icon, so
Yeah.
she can take it this week.
Yeah. So what do you got planned for the rest of your week?
A lot of school, as I said at the top.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make it to the end. So I've got a few assignments to finish up, and then enjoy the weekend. See what it has in store.
Now, when you graduate, are you going to take some time off? Or are you going to go back to the job you had last summer? What have you decided what you want to do?
So I'm going back to school in the fall. I'm still waiting for some acceptances to be delivered. I've already got a couple for programs in the fall, but not entirely sure what it's going to be yet. But I will be going back in the fall for sure.
Yeah.
And then over the summer, I'll just be staying in Guelph, sort of just working wherever. I haven't really figured it out yet, but I might just work at a coffee shop or something, be a barista for the summer.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Yeah.
Yeah, just do something fun, relaxing, that type of thing.
Yeah. After this weekend, I have 2 weeks off, which I'm really excited about. I'm shooting a wedding on the 9th of April, but that's pretty easy. I'm just second shooting, so I'm not the main shooter, so I just do all the things that the main shooter doesn't want to do, and there's no editing. Yeah, there's no editing required, which is amazing. So
that's nice.
The second shooting at weddings is good because you just take all the fun pictures and you chase around kids as they cause havoc, and so yeah, I always like being a second shooter. It's fun. And
that actually does sound really fun.
So much less responsibility too, because if you're the main shooter and you fuck up, there's nowhere to go.
No, nowhere to hide.
No, so being second shooter, there's literally no pressure, and
awesome.
Mostly you hang out with like the grooms and the groomsmen as they get drunk, and really they kind of don't want you there. So you're there, but you're not there, and you're just taking pictures of them being goofballs. It's interesting. Yeah.
Nice. Well, that'll be fun.
Yeah, so that's my weeks coming up. All right, let's get into our independent music. Now, we have a very interesting band. Obviously, we just listened to The Clash, which is a classic punk rock band from England. So we're going to listen to a little bit of punk rock from Italy. So the band is called Billycock, and they're from Latina, Italy, and they contacted us through our Instagram page, and they asked if we could if we could play one of their songs. So Billycock Alberto is on guitar and sings. Luca is also a guitar and sings. Francesco plays bass, and Stefano plays the drum, and he does the backing vocals. And this is their punk rock song called Figure Out. And I'll put all the information about Billycock in the show notes if you do want to check them out on Spotify or Instagram or Facebook. Nick, it was lovely talking to you as always.
Yep.
I'm so curious to see what you think of Robbie Robertson, but we'll talk about that next week.
Yes, we will.
Yep. Darren, just hit play on Billycock.
Ladies that have no regrets, what's to say? Your life has gone to pieces. What a mess. What's your down? Sad little mound. In an empty room, breathe and breathe. To feel the crowd. Your Californian dreamers. Splash it out. What's your down? Sad little mound. What's your down? You're so yourself for ground. Anytime you have tried, you feel nothing but it's and that advice had a price that you paid for, but it's Cause you're not alone, and you're dancing so loud to a lie. Hey, mister, have no regrets. What's that sound? Going black is not the answer. Where'd I go? What's your down? Sad little mound. What's your down? You're so yourself for ground. Anytime you have tried, you felt nothing but it's and that advice had a price that you paid for, but it's Cause you're not alone, and you're dancing so loud to a lie. Anytime you have tried, you felt nothing but it's and that advice had a price that you paid for, but it's Cause you're not alone, and you're dancing so loud to a lie.
You've been listening to Just Hit Play. To contact your hosts, Peter and Nick, or to be featured on an episode as musical talent, email justhitplay7300@gmail.com. Keep up to date with news and announcements by following on Instagram and Facebook, linked in the show notes. Subscribe on your favourite podcatcher to tune in next week for more sonic delights. And if you can't wait till then, check out the Just Hit playlist on Spotify, linked in the show notes. A special thanks to Braden Munch for the theme song, and thank you for listening.